Howdy, everybody. Dr. Andy Woods here. I'm the pastor teacher at Sugarland Bible Church. This is Pastor's Point of View number 358. And this is being released on June the 13th, 2025. You might notice my surroundings are just a little bit different. I'm coming to you from our newly built Studio B. So we're able to kind of do stuff in more of a rapid fire fashion in this studio, but we'll be filming also from Studio A as I keep bringing you, Lord willing, these pastor point of view shows. So with all of that being said, what we have for you today is a prophecy update, and here's our preview slide. Here's the issues that we're going to try to cover in this particular session. More stuff going on with the Jewish movement towards rebuilding their temple. We'll talk about anti-Semitism, which is prophetically significant, and Lord willing, we're going to close out with some more information about the rise of global spirituality, global religiosity, some interesting things happening in Silicon Valley that I think are setting the stage for global religion of the last days. So with all that being said, let's start with our first issue, and that has to do with the temple. The temple, Israel's temple, is a big deal in Bible prophecy because of Daniel chapter 9 and verse 27. This is a tremendous passage that outlines the 7-year tribulation period. It says, "He, or the Antichrist, will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out upon the one who makes desolate." We have a graphic that we typically use to describe this future 7-year tribulation period, and it tells you how long the tribulation period is going to be based on Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, 7 years. Tells you what's going to start it, a peace treaty of some kind between the Antichrist and unbelieving Israel. What's going to conclude that period is the personal return of Jesus to the earth and the second advent. Now that's not the rapture. The rapture will have occurred at least 7 years or more before. But what I just want to draw your attention to is what happens in the middle, exactly at the midpoint. According to Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, the Antichrist who has confirmed this treaty with Israel, guaranteeing her survival, will betray Israel by desecrating her temple, which is obviously something that cannot manifest itself unless a temple is in existence. Right now, Israel has no temple. So any rumblings within Israel to rebuild their third temple, they haven't had a temple for 2,000 years, shows us that we are moving aggressively towards the 7-year tribulation period. Here is a list of Israel's 4 temples that we frequently refer to. The first on the list was the Solomonic temple, which was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Second on the list, you'll notice, is Zerubbabel's temple, built by the returnees from the exile, destroyed by the Romans. And then after that temple was destroyed in AD 70, Israel hasn't had a temple. And what Bible prophecy anticipates is temple number 3. That's the one we're referring to here. In parenthesis there, you'll see all of the scriptures that demand, that this third temple be resurrected at some point. And that's the temple that the Antichrist will desecrate. We believe that temple will be destroyed in the 7th bowl judgment and will be replaced one day by the glorious millennial temple, which will come into existence after Jesus touches down on planet Earth via the second advent. And so it's so exciting To look at things in the news showing us that we are on the precipice of seeing temple number 3 rebuilt, maybe rebuilt in our lifetimes. Bible teachers, many that I've listened to, have put it this way: when the discussion of the world is on Israel, as it's been since 1948, you're dealing with God's hour hand. When the discussion of the world moves to Jerusalem, as has happened post 1967, now you're dealing with the minute hand. And when the discussion of the world gets more focused and focuses on the Temple Mount, now we're dealing with God's second hand. So, with all of that being said, notice this first news article. This one comes from Middle East Eye, I think this is, dated May the 28th, 2025, and it's entitled Smotrich Vows to Rebuild the Temple During Jerusalem Day Celebrations. Here's a little bit from the article. And keep in mind, this seems to be written from a very leftist perspective based on some of the language that's used. For example, it says far-right Israeli finance minister Bezalel Smotrich has called for the rebuilding of a Jewish temple on the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and for the expansion of Israel's borders and Jewish settlements in Gaza. In a speech addressing crowds at Jerusalem Day rally on Monday, which celebrates Israel's occupation — I don't like that word occupation any more than I like far right, because Israel isn't occupying anything. You can't occupy something that you own, but that's another discussion for another day. It says, during these celebrations of the old city of Jerusalem, Smotrich has called for a complete redemption and reconstruction of the temple here, referring to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which settlers had raided earlier. The article quotes him as saying, with God's help, we will expand Israel's borders, bring about complete redemption, and rebuild the temple here. Wow. This guy is not a small fry, so to speak. He is Israel's finance minister talking openly like this. So it shows you that there's a hunger amongst Israel's leadership, at least some of the leaders, to rebuild Temple 3. Let me take you to another article on this same topic. This one comes out of the Western Journal, June 1st, 2025. It's entitled Huge Step Forward on Jerusalem's Temple Mount Takes Us One Step Closer to Jesus' Return. It's amazing that newspaper articles are writing in this manner these days. The article says Shlomo Weil of Jewish News Syndicate recounted in an article last week that for most of the years since the Israeli Defense Force took Jerusalem and the Temple Mount during the Six-Day War in 1967, Jewish people have not been allowed to go there and pray. Weil shared in his JNS story, until recent years, Muslims and the Israeli government did not allow Jewish people to pray on the Temple Mount. Members of the Muslim Guard, the Islamic Waqf, would accompany the group of Jewish pilgrims and would watch our lips to make sure that we weren't praying. The Israeli policemen also watched our lips diligently and enforced the prayer ban, he wrote. But the situation began to change following the murder of 2 Israeli police officers on the Mount in July of 2017. Immediately afterwards, the Israeli police expelled the people who screamed and cursed at the Jews. They also became less diligent about watching our lips, and we were allowed to pray openly as long as we prayed modestly and responded to police instructions, Weil said. He explained that after that, a small group of Jewish worshipers began going daily to the Temple Mount to pray, eventually communally, as the police continued to lessen restrictions. The latest and most dramatic steps forward was this last Tish B'Av, August 12th, 2024, when Jews were for the first time allowed to prostrate fully face down, arms and legs extended, Vile wrote. You can feel your heart pulse, or your heart pulsing rather, against the earth, and as you pray, your lips are almost touching the pavement, he added. This is a whole new and fully embodied avenue of soul expression that has been closed to our Jewish souls for 2,000 years. Weil concluded, we are privileged to live in a generation that once again can serve God on the Temple Mount. Those who go up to serve God there are especially privileged to play a central role in the biblical drama of restoring God's presence to Zion. Knesset member Sukkot recently raised the Israeli flag on the Temple Mount, and he also prayed there during a visit, according to Israel's I-24 News. In a video posted on social media, according to a translation, he says, quote, when all security breaches are said, if even one Jew prays on the Temple Mount, the Middle East will burn. And today, thousands of Jews prayed there, danced, sang, bowed. Members of the Knesset bowed. We waved Israeli flags and nothing happened. All this could indicate that the political and undoubtedly the spiritual climate is changing enough to allow the building of a third temple. So that's just another, and the article has a lot more information in it, believe it or not. I would encourage you to download that and read it. But it's just another article showing the heart of the Jewish people in terms of their ambition to rebuild Temple number 3, which Bible prophecy is very clear is on the horizon. Let me give you one more article on this. It's from the timesofisrael.com, and the title of it, this is dated June 3rd, 2025. It deals with a video. We're going to be playing another video in just a moment, but this one is a different video being referenced. A video appears to show a Jewish man detained after performing a 2 breads offering on the Temple Mount. A video shared online purports to show a Jewish man performing an ancient sacrificial offering on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem Monday, supposedly a first in a millennia, before being detained by the police. According to activists quoted by the Surgim religious news website, a man in the video in a white robe was carrying out the 2 breads offering detailed in the Torah for the Shavuot holiday, in which 2 loaves of leavened bread were waved by a Cohen, or a priest, before the altar and then consumed. The 2 breads offering was the place of the temple court and was waved as prescribed by halakha by a Cohen in a priestly garb. The site quotes activists saying, adding that the act was sanctioned by the rabbi of the Temple Institute. The Jewish organization advocates for the creation of a third temple on the Flashpoint site, which is also considered holy to the Muslims and houses the Al-Aqsa Mosque and Dome of the Rock Shrine. In the video, the man is seen clutching something in his hands as he tries to evade police amid a loud commotion before he is grabbed and he is detained by a police officer and a man dressed in religious garb. Others are also seen being led away by the police as a group of men and boys off to the side sing a traditional religious song about the rebuilding of the temple, which Jews say stood on the site in 2 separate iterations in ancient times. There is no comment on the incident from police. Religious hardliners have made several attempts to bring sacrifices onto the site in recent years, including trying to smuggle goats in shopping bags. but have always been stopped by police in the past. I don't know how in the world you'd fit a goat into a shopping bag, but that's interesting to me. Sukkot of the far right religious Zionism party, which wrote this on X. For the first time in 2,000 years, a kosher sacrifice has been brought on the mount of the house of God. A fragile status quo concerning the site governing the site forbids Jewish prayer, though National Security Minister Ben Gvir has attempted to chip away at the rule, repeatedly declaring that Jewish prayer is allowed. Sukkot was filmed last week walking across the holy site with an Israeli flag, declaring the Temple Mount is in our hands, as other politicians made a show of prostrating at the site. It's just fascinating to me to watch this collection of articles. Almost daily, you read stuff like this, basically showing the hunger of the leadership to rebuild Temple number 3 in Israel, and then just the hunger of the people. And that's what all of these things are pointing towards. We have a brief video clip, goes just under a minute, showing an individual there right in that area, a Jewish individual showing his exuberance for the coming rebuilt temple, which he kind of acts like is a done deal. So if we've got that video queued up.
People forget that the operation on October 7th was called Storm Al-Aqsa, and that is Al-Aqsa. It's a mosque that is sitting on top of where the first and second temple stood over 2,000 years ago, right here in Jerusalem. Well, I have good news for the whole world. There's a rainbow on top of it right now, which is a sign that God gave to Noah that he'll never destroy the world again. And not only will he not destroy the world again, but there will be, in the very near future, the third temple, the Beit HaMikdash. When the Mashiach comes, he will rebuild the Beit HaMikdash right there where that is standing, and the whole world will experience a generation of peace and prosperity. Contrary to what they want you to believe, that it will be a time of war, it's going to be a beautiful time where all the nations of the world will come right here, and they're going to pray and serve the one above in peace and harmony and prosperity. And that's truly what the Jewish people are hoping and wishing for. People forget that the operation on October 7th was called Storm Al-Aqsa, and that is Al-Aqsa. It's a mosque that is sitting on top of where the first and second...
It's so fascinating to hear the exuberance in his voice that comes from something on X posted by a man named Beryl Solomon. And you notice at the top, as he was talking, we don't have to put it up there again, but it said Mashiach is coming. What that means is the Messiah is coming. And of course, in the old days, I remember that the Israelis, they even used to say this when you go through the Temple Institute there in Jerusalem, which is a group that is seeking to ultimately rebuild Temple number 3. You know, they used to say, we're waiting for our Messiah to come and build the temple for us. And I've noticed in recent years, the vocabulary has changed. And now essentially what they say is, they don't say we're waiting for our Messiah to come and rebuild the temple. What they say is we need to rebuild the temple so that the Messiah can come. And so their whole psychology, has changed. In that sense, it's become, far more aggressive. And of course, the Messiah he's talking about is not the Messiah Jesus that we as evangelical Christians know. You're dealing with people that are functioning without the light of the New Testament. And the Messiah, tragically, that he is talking about is the Antichrist, who will enter that covenant with Israel, deceive the nations for 3.5 years, and then at the midpoint will betray them by desecrating their temple, replicating what Antiochus Epiphanes did to the Jewish people in the intertestamental period. And that's the point in which the nation's eyes are opened, and they recognize that their Messiah is not the Antichrist, but it's Jesus, who came into the world, Yeshua, 2,000 years ago. And so this is what it's going to take for God to get the attention of his elect, but currently now unbelieving nation. Certainly individual Jews can come to Christ today, but they're in a minority. The nation as a whole remains in a state of blindness. And so there's a huge knocking down coming for the Jewish people. And it all revolves around the desecration of the temple at the midpoint of the tribulation period, which is obviously something that cannot transpire unless you have a functioning third temple with sacrifices, which obviously many within the nation of Israel have the excitement and the energy and the mindset to rebuild. So that shows us that we're moving fast towards the coming 7-year tribulation period, which means the rapture of the church, which precedes the coming 7-year tribulation period, is coming even faster. That's why I bring these things to your attention in a prophecy update. With all of that being said, let's go to our second major area, and this has to do with anti-Semitism. We have a picture there depicting Revelation chapter 12. We know from Revelation chapter 12, verse 6 through verse 17, when the temple is desecrated, Satan, who apparently still has access to the heavenlies, not to worship and serve as he once did as a high-ranking angel, but rather to communicate and accuse. He loses access to the heavenlies, God's throne, so to speak, right when the beast desecrates the temple, and he plummets to the earth. And Revelation 12, verses 6 through 17, you can read it yourself, is a depiction of Satan knowing he has but a short time, 3.5 years, and he tries to swallow up, gobble up, or destroy the nation of Israel in the second half of the tribulation period, so that Israel's kingdom program, the kingdom is prophesied to come into our world through a repentant national Israel. Satan knows those scriptures very well, and he's trying to prevent the kingdom from manifesting itself. So he's trying to gobble up the nation of Israel in the second half of the tribulation period so that the kingdom can't come. Once the kingdom comes, Satan will be bound for 1,000 years, meaning he will lose his authority, illegitimate authority over planet Earth that he has wielded ever since the fall of man in the Garden of Eden in Genesis 3. And so these types of prophecies indicate that anti-Semitism, Satan trying to gobble up the woman clothed with the sun and the moon and the 12 stars, a clear reference to the nation of Israel, Genesis 37, verses 9 and 10, indicates that that anti-Semitism is going to reach a fever pitch in the end time scenario. So don't expect anti-Semitism, the irrational hatred of the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to go away anytime soon. In fact, it's going to accelerate. In fact, it's going to get worse. And as anti-Semitism grows in our world like I've never seen before, we have clear evidence that we're entering the anti-Semitic climate prophesied or predicted in the last days scenario. The nation of Israel and the Jewish people put up with a lot of propaganda. Look at this particular meme that is making its rounds on social media. It's a woman drinking coffee, and she says here, the biblical Israelites and the state of Israel, which the Rothschilds created in 1947, are not the same. And then there's this disparaging remark at the bottom. Do you understand this yet? Or do I need to say it 10 more times? Boy, if people fall for a meme like that, that's just so sad because it's just littered and riddled with inaccurate information. I mean, what do you mean when you say in this meme that the biblical Israelites are not the same thing as the modern state of Israel? To refute that, And we have this in the newsletter that I put out weekly. We have this link in there every single week because we're trying to counter the propaganda. There's a presentation there given by Bennett Greenspan. He was one of the speakers at the Chafer Theological Seminary Pastors Conference a few years back, and he is an expert in genetics. And he stands there and proves, this is his field, that the Jews living today in the land of Israel are actual biblical Jews that can trace their genetics. We even know their tribes and everything else back to patriarchal times. And he refutes the disputed and discredited Khazar theory, which I don't have time to go into now, but it's basically the idea that there was a group of people in the past, in ancient past, that essentially were Gentiles that converted to Judaism, and therefore the current group of people residing within the nation of Israel owe their heritage to that group, the Khazars. Well, the Khazar theory has been refuted up one side and down the other. And so this meme that's being circulated is based on the discredited Khazar theory. This particular meme also talks about how the nation of Israel somehow owes its heritage to the Rothschilds. All you have to do is consult Joan Peters from Time Immemorial, classic book, or consult the work of Canadian international attorney, Jacques Gauthier, who spent 20 years writing a doctoral dissertation at the University of Geneva. He had hostile readers, and so he had to, dot every I, cross every T, etc. But what happened through that 20-year process is he produced a piece of academic work that demonstrates that the nation of Israel owes their legal heritage to the San Remo post-World War I Accords by United Nations 1947 partition. And so his conclusion in the whole thing is you can say whatever you want about the Jewish nation politically or policy-wise, but here's the one thing you cannot say. You cannot say that the nation of Israel is doing anything illegal. So this particular meme that circulates ignores the work of Jacques Gauthier. It ignores the work of Joan Peters. It ignores the work of Bennett Greenspan, and yet people are deceived by this because they don't know the truth about it. And so you have this kind of cute little meme here, which is circulating on social media, which deceives the masses. A meme like that is evidence to me, this type of propaganda of the anti-Semitic climate that is predicted in the last days scenario. In fact, you'll recognize these two diplomats. We have a picture of them. We covered this in Pastor's Point of View, I believe, 356. These are two Messianic Jews on the precipice of about to be engaged for marriage in the prime of life. There in Washington, D.C., shot down and gunned down by an assassin named Elias Rodriguez. We're going to talk about him in just a moment. Elias Rodriguez, and this is just more evidence of its open fire on Jewish people, this particular incident taking place recently in Washington, D.C. So let's learn a little bit about Elias Rodriguez. What kind of climate did he come from? Notice this article here. It's from the heritage.org, and it says secret Chinese links behind anti-Israel groups that fostered Elias Rodriguez's hate, I've been pronouncing that, Elias Rodriguez's hate which gunned down these two Jewish diplomats. Where did this individual come from? The article says this: monsters like Elias Rodriguez don't suddenly emerge from under a rock. Their anti American and anti Israel hatreds are honed over time by a revolutionary ecosystem composed of different organisms. Years before he shot in cold blood the couple that worked at the Israeli embassy in the prime of their lives, Rodriguez was taught to loathe the West. Now, when you look at news reports, they don't bring this up. They make it sound like he was just some kind of lone wolf, lone actor. But the truth of the matter is the Chinese Communist Party, according to the article, worked to mentor him, disciple him in his despicable worldview that led to these assassinations. The article says we know for sure that concurrently with his education, Rodriguez was associated with two leading institutions of the revolutionary ecosystem: the Party for Socialism and Liberation and one of the front groups called the Answer Coalition, an acronym for Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. He attended several marches coordinated by both groups in 2018 and was identified as a member of the PSL, that's the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Black Lives Matter, BLM, Chicago also admitted that Rodriguez was a supporter and took place in several marches. BLM Chicago was one of the groups that cruelly posted pictures of paragliders with Palestinian flags after the terrorist group Hamas massacred over 1,200 Israelis on October the 7th, 2023, the New York Post reported at the time. Rodriguez shouted, "Free, free Palestine," moments before his arrest. Fascinating article. I would encourage you to download this and read it. It documents Rodriguez's involvement with Answer, PSL. Other groups that are connected with all of this are the People's Forum and the International People's Assembly, IPA, and their connections to the ruling Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. Rodriguez apparently also had ties to a left-wing power couple, and their names are Neville Roy Singham and his wife, Jody Evans. It talks about connections to the Shanghai Maku Cultural Communications, also ties to the People's Forum. And the People's Forum, the article says, is headed by Manolo de los Santos, who has been indoctrinated in Cuba for years and has tweeted pictures of himself with Cuban dictator Miguel Diaz-Canel. Here's how the article concludes. These are the groups and the foreign forces that nurture our young haters. Rodriguez did not come out of nowhere. He came from here. A part of it that is just underreported, is this communist socialist network that nurtured the hate in this person. He was not a lone wolf. He was not a lone actor. There are radical forces around our world and even in our country and even in our schools and universities that foster this mentality. Yet at the same time, it shouldn't surprise us because the Bible anticipates an intense hatred for the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as we get closer to the end times scenario. And then there was another shooting. Well, it wasn't a shooting. It was injuries that took place related to someone that in Boulder, Colorado, during a pro-Zionist event, used Molotov cocktails, etc., to injure people. It is somewhat interesting to me that the interval between those two anti-Semitic incidents, the one in Washington, D.C., and the one in Boulder, Colorado, the time distance between the two is shrinking. I mean, it used to be that incidents happened in great irregularity, great rarity, but now they're happening more and more frequently. And so I found the short distance of time between these two anti Semitic outbreaks to be very, very interesting. It again shows us the anti Semitic climate that we're moving into. By the way, Donald Trump, on his Truth social media account, talked about this Boulder incident. And let's go ahead and put that up if we could and read that. It says, yesterday's horrific attack in Boulder, Colorado will not be tolerated in the United States of America. He, that's the individual that committed these crimes, anti-Semitic crimes, came in through Biden's ridiculous open border policy, which has hurt our country so badly. He must go out under Trump policy. Acts of terrorism will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This is yet another example of why we must keep our borders secure and deport illegal anti-American radicals from our homeland. My heart goes out to the victims of this terrible tragedy, the great people of Boulder, Colorado. And to that, we can only say amen and amen. Let's read a little bit more about this tragedy in Boulder, Colorado. Notice this particular article from Town Hall. This is dated June the 2nd, 2025. It's entitled, After Boulder's Firebombing of a Pro-Israel Event, the Intifada is here. I mean, what is this Intifada? It's essentially something that started in 1987 and that it experienced a resurgence in 2000, right in that time period, early 2000s. And it's a group of people that are militant. They're on the borders of Israel. They result to militant activity, and they're protesting Israel's occupation of Palestine. When I say Israel's occupation of Palestine, I'm using their verbiage, not my verbiage or true verbiage, because there is no such thing as Palestine, as we've explained on prior shows. And Israel isn't occupying anything. You can't occupy what you already own. Remember what Jacques Gautier said in his lengthy dissertation, now in the form of a book that I think you can find easily on Amazon. He said Israel isn't doing anything illegal. So illegal occupation is a phrase that people repeat over and over again, but there's really no truth to it. You just have to hear the other side. You can't occupy what you own. You can say whatever you want about Israel, Gautier says, but the one thing you cannot say is that they are doing something illegal. But here, this article points out that this intifada is not just something over there in the Middle East, it's something here now. And this tragedy that happened in Boulder, Colorado, demonstrates that. The article says there was another terrorist attack against pro-Israel demonstrators in Boulder, Colorado. It was an event raising awareness for the hostages that have to be set free in Gaza. The attack happened to be near Pearl Street. The suspect, Mohammed Solomon, so he's Islamic, obviously, hurled various insults at the crowd before launching Molotov cocktails, inflicting multiple casualties. This will end when Palestine is free and for us, he reportedly shouted, along with some end Zionist chants. Isn't this the same thing that Elias Rodriguez was chanting in that assassination of those two young Israeli diplomats in Washington, D.C.? You see, you're seeing a pattern here. The article goes on and it says, we have the firebombing in Boulder. In May, 2 Israeli aides were assassinated at an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum. The shooter, Elias Rodriguez, shouted "Free Palestine" as police arrested him. In April, Cody Balmer tried to set fire to the Pennsylvania governor's mansion. Governor Josh Shapiro and his family were asleep inside and were luckily able to escape, able to flee the residence, which sustained severe damage. When the media suffocated the story, it was revealed that Balmer attacked the residents because of Shapiro's stance on Israel. And here's how this article, written by Matt Vespa of Town Hall, concludes. The Intifada is here, folks. Left-wing terrorism is running amok. So we have the incident in Washington, D.C. We have the incident in Boulder, Colorado. We have this incident by Cody Balmer in Pennsylvania. And what I'm trying to contend here for is the duration of time between these incidents is shrinking. In other words, anti-Semitism within our culture and our world is becoming institutionalized. It's becoming normalized. It's a horrific thing to think about, but it fits the prophetic scenario very, very well. Along those lines, as Islam increases, anti-Semitism increases as well. And one of the great Islamic hotspots is taking place right here where I'm recording this in Houston, Texas. With that being said, notice this particular article, another one of the great Rare Foundation articles, this one written by Amy Mick. Maybe you pronounce that Meek. And this is written May 30th, 2025, and it says, "Warning, Texas. Houston mosque run by Sharia jurist who endorses execution for apostates, rejects U.S. law, and shields Hamas." What's happening right now in the state of Texas? I mean, we've covered a lot of different things happening in Plano, other areas of Texas. Well, here's something that's taking place right here in Houston. Amy Meek writes, "In the heart of America's most prestigious medical district, a mosque led by one of the most radical Sharia jurists in the U.S. is quietly transforming into a command post for political Islam, advancing a foreign legal system that openly rejects the Constitution, threatens national security, and exploits religious freedom to establish Islamic supremacy." Now, keep in mind that Houston is known, particularly the area where I'm in now, Sugar Land, is known for its hospitals, cancer treatment facilities, etc. And notice how this particular enclave, according to Amy Meek, started to develop. The Medical Center Islamic Society, otherwise known as MCIS, originally was established in the 1990s as a modest prayer space for visiting Muslim patients and their families. But it has quietly evolved into a religious institution led by one of the most ideological, orthodox Islamic legal scholars in the United States, a man named Dr. Salal al-Sawi. Now in the midst of major expansion project, MCIS is no longer a quiet place of worship. It has become a powerful platform for advancing a Sharia-aligned ideology in one of America's most sensitive and globally trafficked medical zones. In addition to serving as president and chairman of MCIS, al-Sawi is the Secretary General for the Assembly of Muslim Jurists, otherwise known as AMJA, an orthodox Sharia-based legal body operating under U.S. nonprofit protections. Under his leadership, AMJA has issued a series of alarming legal rulings, otherwise known as fatwas, including public fatwas shielding Hamas from criticism, endorsement of the death penalty for apostates, and explicit warnings to Muslims against integrating into Western society or obeying U.S. law when it contradicts Islamic principles. The article goes on and talks about this individual, his affiliation with radical educational institutions, some of which he studied at in the Middle East, some of which he taught at. And then it goes on and it mentions this AMGA that he also exerts leadership over, and it talks about a lot of the fatwas that have come out of that organization, such as the following: support for Hamas, apostasy punishments, including the death penalty. That's the death penalty for Muslims that happen to integrate into Western society. Punishments for blasphemy and adultery, including the death penalty, and explicitly permitting female circumcision as an honorable act. In another fatwa, AMGA states that forced sex in marriage is not considered rape. I mean, this is who this man is that's running this spiritual center in the heart of Houston's medical district. Opposition to U.S. troops. What other fatwas have been issued? Anti-Christian fatwas that are anti-Christian against Christian schooling. They're anti-Christian schooling, in other words. And of course they would be, because the Muslims don't want their children in Western schools because they might learn Western values. So there's just this condemnation of Christian schooling. In 2022, Al-Sawi, if I'm pronouncing his name right, warned Muslim parents not to send their children to Catholic or Christian schools, calling them poisonous and full of polytheism. There's a fatwa undermining U.S. law. AMGA teaches that all non-Sharia legal systems, including the United States Constitution, are fundamentally flawed. There's a condemnation of judicial participation. AMGA asserts that Muslims are generally prohibited from serving as judges in legal systems not governed by Islamic law. There's a condemnation of citizenship and loyalty. AMGA has stated that it is definitely prohibited for Muslims to become citizens of non-Muslim countries, calling it a potential form of apostasy. There's an offensive jihad, while AMGA states that Muslims in the West are not currently in a position to wage offensive jihad. It notes that that is a matter of timing and capability. There is some information that AMGA has issued concerning government employment. AMGA forbids Muslims from working for the FBI and other U.S. secret services. And here's really the heart of the article. It says AMGA fatwas reflect a broader legal framework, one that prepares for a shift from passive resistance to active jihad the moment a caliphate is declared. If a caliphate is declared even outside the U.S., Muslims living in America who adhere to this ideology could view themselves as religiously obligated to wage war against the United States from within. That's who this individual is that enjoys this spiritual position here in the heart of Houston. The article concludes by saying this is not religious freedom. It is a parallel system operating under religious cover. And as systems like this grow, the amount of anti-Semitism that you will see in the United States will grow as well, because Muslims, fundamentalist Muslims, are opposed to the nation of Israel on religious grounds, because that's where they think that Muhammad allegedly ascended back to Allah on a steed named Barak, and they believe that the city of Jerusalem, particularly the Temple Mount, is their third holiest city. So, what you're seeing happening in the United States is the growth of Islam. And as Islam continues to grow, essentially what we can expect, essentially what we can anticipate is more and more religious hatred against the Jewish people, really setting the stage for the last days scenario concerning anti Semitism. Now, this anti Semitism that I've been talking about is not just something domestic, it's not just a North American issue. The Bible predicts that it will spread throughout the world. Notice if we can put up Zechariah chapter 12 and verse 3. The prophet Zechariah predicts it will come about in that day that that's God, will make Jerusalem a heavy stone. For all the peoples and all who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. Notice the parallel passage there in Zechariah 14, verses 2 and 3, where God 2,500 years ago says, I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. The city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, half the city exiled, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as when he fights on a day of battle. So in those two Zechariah passages, notice the reference to all. All the nations of the earth, the United States of America included, turning against Israel in the last days. Europe, as I am speaking, is largely becoming anti-Israel. We see that because of Europe's immigration patterns. Notice this article from ZeroHedge.com, May the 31st, 2025. It's entitled Shocking Data Shows Massive Demographic Transformation in Europe. The article says new data showing the percentage of people not speaking German at home in Austria underlies just how massive the demographic transformation has been in the country, according to a Hungarian economist. Obvious winds are blowing in the West. Economist Giza Sebastian, if I'm pronouncing that right, posted on his Facebook page along with some astonishing data. According to the latest Austrian statistics, 1/3 of primary school pupils in Austria are non-native German speakers. In cities, the proportion is even worse. In Salzburg, for example, 1 in 2 children, 51.8%, do not speak German at home, he noted. This particular observer who's monitoring these things, the expert, called the latest data signs of social transformation that are shaping the future of Europe, a trend that, if continued, will lead to Austria losing its character as a nation state. The article goes on and describes how those living there in Austria, which is kind of a replica of what's happening all over Europe, are vigorously opposed to this. They don't want all of this illegal immigration. They don't want this type of open doors, porous borders policy. They want their borders shut, and it doesn't matter. The powers that be, the political powers, keep pursuing this open borders mindset. And Europe, Austria, as an example of what's happening throughout Europe, is essentially losing its character as an individual nation state. And folks, that's exactly what can and will happen here should we, God forbid, get another left-leaning president that believes in this porous borders, open borders mindset. In fact, look at this particular screenshot. I believe this comes from X, of one of the few courageous politicians, statesmen in Europe, a man who's been viciously attacked, people argue all the time he violates the hate crime laws that exist there, but he's undeterred and he continues to speak out. His name, you should know this name and follow him. His name is Gert Wilders. And notice what he says in this particular screenshot from X. He says, walk the streets of Western Europe, and you'll see it looks like a medieval Arab city full of headscarves and burqas. We feel like strangers in our own country. Immigration is changing our culture, not for the better, but for the worse. Although on a smaller scale, we've experienced a lot of these kinds of things in Houston. We've experienced a lot of these kinds of things right here in Sugar Land. It's very common to walk into a public establishment, a restaurant, or a coffee shop, and to see a female Muslim in complete and total burqa, head to toe, pitch black color. And the only thing you can see of her is those little slits where she's allowed to look out via her eyes, but she is completely and totally covered. And this kind of thing is common to see in the month of June, right here in Houston, in the hot Houston sun. This is a Middle East versus West cultural conflict related to a group of people who essentially refuse to assimilate and desire to build their own parallel system right here in Western civilization. And as God is my witness, if this kind of thing continues and unabated immigration continues in Europe and even in the United States, we will lose our civilization. We will lose our culture. The intolerant culture, which is where Islam comes from, will swallow up the naive, pluralistic, tolerant culture of Western civilization. And as this increases, so will worldwide anti-Semitism. One other fast article under this subject of worldwide anti-Semitism. This is a very short article. This one from AustraliaOnlineNews.com. This is something taking place in Brisbane. This is dated June the 1st, 2025. It says Brisbane hotel workers walk off the job to protest over a Zionist event. So here's a hotel that just decides to have a Zionist event in their hotel, and the staff or the workers are so upset with this that they just walk off the job. Notice the comments of the mayor as he just made excuses for these people. It says, but former Greens councillor and Lord mayoral candidate Jonathan, and I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing his last name. It begins with S. I think it's pronounced Sarong Onathon, something like that, who attended the rally and live streamed it, rejected any notion of anti-Semitism. Oh, this has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, he says. And here's his quote, it's disingenuous, offensive, and ridiculous that to claim all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. And we need to stop this, is what he said, according to this news article. This is something that many have called the new anti-Semitism. Hating a Jew is anti-Semitic, but hating Israel is okay. So as long as these workers are walking off the job, not because they're hating an individual Jew, but hating the modern state of Israel, then that's not anti-Semitic. It's not okay. And so let's kowtow to these workers that walked off the job. I say to these workers that walked off the job, two words, actually three, because it's a contraction, that Donald Trump frequently used before he became president of the United States in his reality show. And those words were, you're fired. You are fired. You want to walk off the job because having a Zionist event in the hotel offends your political sensibilities, and get lost. We don't need you to work here, but that will never happen. Every excuse is made for these staff workers at this particular hotel. including coming from those in the highest political echelons, like this mayoral candidate. This is, folks, a sign of the times, and it shows us the type of anti-Semitism that we are drifting into. Real fast, I want to cover one more area, and that has to do with global religion. We know that there's going to be a one world religion in the last days. We know that from passages like Revelation 17 and verse 15, where John, as he's being given information by the Holy Spirit, writes, "And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues." As we have explained many times, the harlot is false religion, and the waters upon which the harlot sits communicates the mass of humanity that this false religious system will influence in the last days. And it's a clear prophecy about one world religion in the last days. Now, let me tell you something about one world religion. What Satan does with false religion, one world religion, is he tries to run his program as close as he can get it towards biblical truth. Because if it's very, very close to biblical truth without being biblical truth, then those that are uninitiated, those that are unfamiliar with the Bible, those that aren't disciples of our Lord Jesus Christ are fooled by this one world religion because it looks so spiritual. Not all spirituality out there is biblical. And in fact, the name of the coming man of sin, the man of lawlessness, is the Antichrist. He's called that a number of times in John's epistles. And John, in his epistles, tells us that the Antichrist is coming. The prefix anti, many people confuse it with as being opposed to Christ. And certainly the Antichrist will be that, but there's another meaning to that prefix anti. It essentially can also mean in the place of Christ. Something that looks so similar to Christ, but isn't Christ, fools the masses because it looks good. Satan comes as an angel of light, and it looks very spiritual. And that is what is happening with the development of one world religion. One very fast article on this. This comes from Vanity Fair. This is dated April 2025. My date says April 2025. There's actually two dates given when I researched this. Others, I'm reading the updated one, April 2025. The screenshot that you see there is March 2025. The title of this is "Christianity Was Borderline Illegal in Silicon Valley, but Now It's the New Religion." It says this: believers like Gary Tan are flipping the script in the venture capital world, making faith just as much as the ability to turn a fortune. The article says, "We are here to listen in on a conversation between Dr. Francis Collins." Now, let me just stop right there. The moment you see the name Francis Collins, you know you're dealing with something problematic, because Francis Collins is one of the progenitors of a group called Bios Logos, which essentially is supposedly a Christian group, but they've thrown in the towel to evolution. And they don't take Genesis 1 through 11 literally, and they think Genesis 1 through 11 is somehow compatible with evolution, which it's not. So he's been promoting a spiritual yet false form of origins. And so his involvement in Silicon Valley and the spirituality that's being spread there should raise red flags. We are here to listen in on a conversation between Dr. Francis Collins, the former director of the National Institutes of Health and leader of the Human Genome Project, and Gary Tan, the president and CEO of Silicon Valley's influential startup incubator, Y Combinator, which has hatched thousands of tech companies with a combined valuation of 600 billion with a B. For many years, the running joke popularized by the HBO show Silicon Valley was that in the Bay Area, Christianity was borderline illegal. And then the article says how Silicon Valley sort of has had a change of attitude, a change of direction, a 180, an about face. And now all of a sudden they are open to spirituality. All of a sudden they are open to Jesus. All of a sudden they are open to Christianity. But here's what I would like to ask. Is this the Christianity of the Bible that they're suddenly open to? I would say it isn't. Here's a sentence from the article. It says, these events are a collision of godliness and good old-fashioned hedonism. Amid caviar bumps and champagne, you might find yourself shoulder to shoulder with someone like Thiel, I believe his first name is Peter, who is, as Stephen points out, a gay billionaire, and who at Acts 17 Collective's pilot event in May spoke at length about his relationship with Jesus Christ. Let me tell you something about Jesus Christ. If you're gay, if you're practicing homosexual, and you meet the real Jesus Christ through his free offer of salvation, faith alone, through grace alone, in the middle tense of your salvation, progressive sanctification, the Holy Spirit will start to agitate you and will start to change you in the area of homosexuality. Homosexuality is not of God. You can see that on the very first page of the Bible. God made them male and female, and we have in our Bibles 1 Corinthians 6, verses 9 through 11, where Paul of homosexuals said, such as some of you were, but you were washed. You were changed via the Holy Spirit. And so when someone here is called a gay Christian billionaire, I'm already thinking, in addition to Francis Collins, who was involved in all of this stuff, who is a non-literalist in the area of Genesis chapters 1 through 11, that we're dealing here with another Jesus. I mean, this stuff sounds so spiritual, and I wish it were all true. I wish Jesus was spreading through Silicon Valley, but there's enough information in this article to indicate that this is not the true Jesus Christ. The article goes on and it says this, but not every religious technologist is necessarily all in on Silicon Valley's burgeoning embrace of Christianity. Luke Burgess, a Catholic entrepreneur who recently hosted a dinner at the Vatican dealing with AI, said there is a danger in trying to map Christianity onto everything that Silicon Valley is doing. In Silicon Valley, said Burgess, there is a strong strain in which they're trying to create something that would take the place of God. You start creating things in the area of tech and AI in the place of God, that's not true Christianity. The article says some of what Tan has been getting at on stage reminded me of those Silicon Valley technologists that Burgess warned me about, the ones that are so eager to manufacture their own God. And admittedly, at one point in the reporting of this story, I started down a highly cynical, conspiratorial line of thought that some people in Silicon Valley, like Tan, were cloaking their ambitions to build a God in the guise of traditional religion. Like a 21st century version of Joseph Smith with a direct line to a godlike intelligence that performs technological miracles, I posited to Eliezer Yudkowsky, the co-founder of the Thiel backed Machine Intelligence Research Institute, who has warned that unchecked development of superintelligent machines will result in humanity's certain extinction. Here's how the article concludes. People are so ready to make AGI their god, Tan added. What we're trying to do with events like this is to give them an alternative. So this is some sort of alternative spirituality that's now being offered in Silicon Valley under the name Jesus. I'm here to tell you, folks, that I don't think this is the real Jesus. I think this is a third way false Jesus. And I think as this false Jesus comes into our world through these movers and shakers, it's setting the stage for the global spirituality, global religiosity spoken of in the last days. Not everyone who uses the name Jesus is worshiping the true Jesus. Not everyone who uses spiritual talk like gospel has the right gospel. And we're told over and over again in Scripture to be discerning and to be wary of things like this. Let me just give you this verse here, Second Corinthians chapter 11, verses 3 and 4. Paul writes, "But I am afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds will be led astray from the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ. For if one comes and preaches another Jesus," did you hear me, folks? Another Jesus, "whom we have not preached, or you receive a different spirit which you have not received, or a different gospel," did you hear me, folks? Different gospel, "one which you have not accepted," Paul, being facetious here, says you bear this beautifully. So a false religion coming from Silicon Valley, a part of our country that used to make Christianity borderline illegal, has suddenly embraced Jesus. I think there's enough evidence here to suggest that is not the true Jesus, and it's setting the stage for the global spirituality of the last days. So in this particular show, and we don't have time to do any infomercials, we were able to cover three quick things in our prophecy update: information related to temple number 3, which is prophetically significant information related to anti-Semitism in our country and our world, which is prophetically significant. And I threw in a little bit here concerning global religion of the last days. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And we, Lord willing, will see you next time on Pastor's Point of View. God bless you.